started dressing properly, then you can probably do the candles.
Yeah, that's the first thing.
For him to dress properly.
All right.
We can get you more buttons. He's got two. Alternate back and forth.
Job chapter 14. Okay, so we're still in Job's answer, his second answer to Zophar. So remember, this is the second round. So Zophar is the second of the two that spoke, and we still have Eliphaz coming up.
For his second speaking.
What's that?
For his second.
This is the second exchange. So we're in the second exchange, and we're halfway through it here. Job is answering Zophar. Previous chapter, he made the case that he is still going to hope in God. And he's going to ignore this useless wisdom that his friends are throwing at him, that is of no comfort, and in fact is contradicting God's own testimony that God has already made concerning Job. But Job, as we'll see in chapter 14, never uplifts himself or man. He knows what he is before a holy God. He doesn't minimize the sin in which he was born or the sin that he commits. His righteousness is not based upon his righteous deeds, even though he was a righteous man and acted righteously. His righteousness is based upon God's testimony. And that'll come out again when we see the third friend, Eliphaz, speaking in Job's response. So now 14, these words will be very familiar to you because these are part of our funeral burial rite. Man who is born of a woman is few of days and full of trouble. He comes out like a flower and withers. He flees like a shadow and continues not. And do you open your eyes on such a one as this and bring me into judgment with you? Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? There is not one. Since his days are numbered, and the number of his months is with you, and you have appointed his limits that he cannot pass, look away from him and leave him alone, that he may enjoy like a hired hand his day. And so, notice, first of all, he speaks of our life as brief and fragile, like a flower that grows up and the wind immediately blasts it, the tender grass that all of a sudden dries up in the heat of the wind. He says that's the way man is. All men, me, you who are speaking to me and trying to condemn me, all men. And now since this is the way of all men, are you now going to open your eyes on such a one as this, which you should include yourself in, and bring me into judgment with you? Are you going to make me agree with you? I already agree with you that man is born and conceived in sin, and that he has no goodness in himself. Because he says, who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? There is not one. And what applies to Job applies to all people. Man's days are simply determined by God. Now we like to think that we have some say in our days of this world if we avoid danger, eat healthy and so forth. But in the end, the time of our death is already determined by God. We cannot turn it away ultimately. It will happen to us. God knows the number of months. He knows the exact time and moment. He's appointed limits, and man cannot pass beyond those limits. Eventually, judgment in this way of our old, frail, sinful bodies is going to come upon every single person, even those whom God has declared righteous. And we will go down to the grave. And very often that death is not pretty. Even when our hope is in God, sometimes our death is hard. And so Job is telling his friends, and so it is with him. Look away from him and leave him alone, that he may enjoy like a hired hand his day, the days that God has appointed to him. Yes, Isaiah? That's true. That's true. But you have to understand that when we're under persecution, trouble, suffering, sickness, disease, we often cannot, all we can see is our sin. And we look at it and we see, yes, I deserve all these things. God owes me nothing. And whatever good I have done, it's only good that He's worked in me. And so, when Job is under oppression like this, that's all he can see as well. But you're right, God did use Job, and He had already used Job to save his wife, to save his children. Even though his children lost their lives, we have every reason to believe that they died in the faith. And he was also a prophet to his neighbors. Remember, we've noted several times that Job would have been considered one of the leaders of his whole society.
Yeah, people would come to him for advice.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of like a mayor.
Right. But so it is. But it's good to point this out because so it is with all of us. Many pastors speak as Job has done here, when they cannot see any fruit that has proceeded from their own ministries. And usually they never do. But that doesn't mean the fruit was not there. Because God uses His word in His way at His time. And He often doesn't tell us how or when. Okay, verse 7. For there is hope for a tree, if it be cut down, that it will sprout up again, and that its shoots will not cease. Though its roots grow old in the earth and its stump die in the soil, yet at the scent of water it will bud and put out branches like a young plant. And we see that. You see when you cut down a tree, like that old pear tree right by the water pump out here. I mean, it's been cut down and yet it's got branches all over the thing now. This is what Job's referring to. So, a tree seems to be more resilient than a man, is his point. So he says, but a man dies, and that's it. He's laid low. He breathes his last, and then where is he? As waters fail from a lake and a river wastes away and dries up, so a man lies down and rises not again till the heavens are no more. He will not awake. So you notice here that he will not awake or be roused from his sleep until the heavens are no more. And so already here you have Job anticipating what he says later about the resurrection. That there will be a time when a man rises again. But in the meantime, as far as his life in this world is concerned, it's over. He will not come back. And again, as he began this chapter, that's true of all men. No matter how righteous or unrighteous they seem to be. Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, that you would conceal me until your wrath be past, that you would appoint me a set time and remember me. Hide me in the grave. Hide me in the depths of the earth. This is Sheol. Conceal me till your wrath be past, that you would appoint to me a set time and remember me. So let me go into the grave early, so that when my time for resurrection comes, then I can awake in joy, so that I don't have to endure this trouble anymore while I'm still alive right now. If a man dies, shall he live again? And again, Job is not talking about, he says, in the context of this world, before the heavens pass away, will a man rise again? No, he won't. All the days of my service I would wait till my renewal should come. You would call, and I would answer you. You would long for the work of your hands. For then you would number my steps. You would not keep watch over my sin. So in the grave, he would have a break from his own sin and from the oppression of the world. My transgression would be sealed up in a bag, and you would cover over my iniquity. But the mountain falls and crumples away, and the rock is removed from its place. The waters wear away the stones. The torrents wash away the soil of the earth. So even the mountains which seem to last forever don't. worn down by erosion and torn down. Earthquakes can destroy them, the earth shakes, and so forth. So it is that you destroy the hope of man. You prevail forever against him, and he passes. You change his countenance and send him away. His sons come to honor, and he does not know it. They are brought low, and he perceives it not. Why? Because he's been already brought to the grave. He doesn't know what's happening to the generations that will proceed from him. He feels only the pain of his own body, and he mourns only for himself. All right. So much of what Job speaks about here speaks about our ignorance, that we do not get to see the hand of God in what he is doing. That's a constant theme throughout Job. We don't get an explanation from God. He owes us none. And in fact, in all the book of Job, he doesn't give it to him. Now, he gives it to us, remember. We know why this is happening. Job doesn't. And this is kind of a meta thing taking place in the scripture here, right? Because we are sort of the silent witnesses of all that is happening to Job. We get to see what leads up to it. We get to see him suffering through it, not knowing, not understanding why, but yet now we know why. All that is happening here to Job, including his argument with his friends, is for our sakes. It's for us. And so here, thousands of years later, is part of the answer to Job's question of why. Why is this happening? And Job knows now, of course, too. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, should a wise man answer with windy knowledge? Keep going back to this. Your words are wind. You're just blathering along and wasting your breath. And fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? But you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. He's, again, the more we get into this argument, the more these friends become convinced that Job is guilty and that he's hiding his sins and that he is in rebellion against God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. So Eliphaz is offended, because in the previous chapter, Job just says, you are no different than any man. You too will be brought to the dust. And Eliphaz is offended now. And he says, your words condemn you, not me. Are you the first man who was born? Or were you brought forth before the hills? Have you listened in the counsel of God? And do you limit wisdom to yourself? Again, the constant theme that we keep hearing is, you're not the only one who's wise, Job. You should listen to us because we're wise too.
It seems as it goes along, they just get more incompetent to the situation.
Yeah, they do. That's right.
Instead of being able to understand more of what's going on, they
so
lose
what
sight
they don't
of
see
what's
is,
going on.
Job, you're the one who's instructed all these people, and now you won't even instruct yourself. And they don't even see that he's instructing them right now, but they are rejecting his testimony.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Job is continuing to be a prophet in that sense. It's questionable whether Job himself realizes that's still the case. Mm-hmm. He's still serving in the office of a prophet now to his friends even.
And then rejecting his testimony is only hindering his belief that he is still good and he still has a place in which he...
Part of the temptation is the accusation. Mm-hmm. Because remember, at the very beginning, the argument, the challenge of the Satan to the Lord is, Job will curse you and rebel and reject you as his God, and reject the righteousness which you have declared if you take these things away. And so he's taken everything away, and now the oppression is coming from his friends. And so now it's not a bodily temptation, it is a spiritual temptation. It is it is the contradicting voice of the Satan coming through the mouth of his friends. The accuser. Because remember, the Satan is the accuser. That's his function. To accuse men of sin. And his friends, that's all they're doing. Okay. Verse 9. What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? Both the gray-haired and the aged are among us, older than your father. So, I'm assuming that's probably talking about Bildad. Must have been a fairly old man. Are the comforts of God too small for you, or the word that deals gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away, and why do your eyes flash? That you turn your spirit against God and bring such words out of your mouth. What he ends up doing here, of course, is saying that we have the aged, gray-haired men, as well as youths, and they're all telling you the same thing, Joe. And you're not listening. All of our wise men are here telling you this, and yet you're shutting your ears to it. And when you're doing that, you're turning yourself against God, because we're telling you what God is saying. But they're acting as false prophets. What is man that he can be pure? Or he who is born of a woman that he can be righteous? Gee, I wonder where he had just heard that spoken. Job doesn't disagree with that. Job himself said the same thing. Behold, God puts no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. What does he mean by that? Well, the holy ones is a title. It's talking about the members, the higher angelic creatures that we've talked about before, that are even sometimes called lesser Elohim, the ones that he has assigned rule, governance, but yet they rebelled. They fell. And even they are not holy in his sight. These great, majestic creations of his with all of their mighty power, and they're not pure. How much less one who is abominable and corrupt, a man who drinks injustice like water. I will show you, hear me. And what I have seen I will declare. What wise men have told without hiding it from their fathers, to whom alone the land was given and no stranger passed among them. So now not just the wise men that are here with you, Job, I'm going to tell you something that we've been taught by the generations of the wise in times of old. The wicked man writhes in pain all of his days, through all the years that are laid up for the ruthless. Dreadful sounds are in his ears, and prosperity the destroyer will come upon him. So, what is he doing here with this, through the end of this chapter? He's saying, I'm going to describe the wicked man, Job. I'm going to tell you what a wicked man is like. Now, you should wonder, am I behaving exactly this way? Is what is happening to the wicked also happening to me? Well, if what happens to the wicked is also happening to me, what's your conclusion, Job? That you're wicked. All right. Now, of course, here, while parts of this are true, and are often true in this life, the wicked often prosper. They often prosper right to the end until they go down into the grave. Now, they may not have true peace in this life, but the wicked often do prosper. All right. Dreadful sounds are in the wicked's ears. In prosperity, the destroyer will come upon him, and he does not believe that he will return out of darkness, and he is marked for the sword. He wanders abroad for bread, saying, where is it? In other words, the man who was rich now can't even find any food to eat. He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Distress and anguish terrify him. They prevail against him like a king ready for battle, because he has stretched out his hand against God and defies the Almighty, running stubbornly against him with a thickly bossed shield. Because he has covered his face with his fat and gathered fat upon his waist, and has lived in desolate cities, in houses that none should inhabit, which were ready to become heaps of ruins. He will not be rich. His wealth will not endure, nor will his possessions spread over the earth. He will not depart from darkness. The flame will dry up his shoots, and by the breath of his mouth he will depart. Let him not trust in emptiness, deceiving himself, for emptiness will be his payment. Now, again, you can understand all this properly, because what he says is ultimately always true of the wicked. Everything that they have crumbles down eventually to dust. And even if they take up arms against God, which the great rich men of our world do, they do that very thing. They conspire against the Lord and against Christ to break God's bonds, to free themselves from him as if they can. And all of it comes to nothing. That's all true. It will be paid in full before his time, and his branch will not be green. He will shake off his unripe grape like the vine, and cast off his blossom like the olive tree. For the company of the godless is barren, and fire consumes the tents of bribery. They conceive trouble and give birth to evil, and their womb prepares deceit. The basic mistake that Eliphaz is making is that he is judging all of these matters purely by what happens here before death. Because his point is that the truly wicked man is going to have all these things taken away from him, and all of his works are going to come to nothing before he dies. They will all come to nothing. But there is no promise that the wicked will be judged in this life, and that ultimately all that he purposes will fail in this life while he's alive. Often that doesn't happen. And so now what do you have? You have Job saying, God can bring me to the grave justly, and yet I can still be righteous. And then the wicked prospers, and yet ultimately he is destroyed too. What's the difference between these men as far as the eye can judge? As far as the eye judges, nothing. You can't tell them apart based upon their prosperity. So if the wicked man is brought low, as often does still happen in this world, and Job is brought low, what conclusion can you make? The proper conclusion is, we are born in sin, and ultimately that means we will die, because sin brings death. Job speaks of his own death, but Job also speaks of the life that he will receive once his death is finished. Eliphaz has not a word of this. The glory that is revealed is not in this world. It is in the resurrection. Okay, we'll stop there. And we get Job's response next time. 2 chapters. And then round 3 begins.
Wait, there's another one?
Yeah. There's 3 rounds of the argument.